Oh, well, I'll edit this out. I did forewarn you about the random question from previous guests, right? You got that? Okay,
Yep.
good. So we'll edit this part out. So we're going to start about now. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Molten Truth. This is Zoe Michaels, and we are here today with A-M Mawhiney. And I have to admit, I had to ask her beforehand how to say her name because, as you have known from watching episodes before, I am infamous for saying names wrong. So today I wanted to get it right. Anne-Marie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
I know we had a little trouble connecting with each other at one point. My schedule was a little wonky, and then you had something that prevented you from making it. So I'm
Yeah,
glad we were able to finally connect.
me too.
Yeah. So, because sometimes I have good intentions, but sometimes my memory fails me, I do want to get out of the way your website so people can find you. Can you share that with us?
Yes, it's www.A-M Mawhiney. So if you look at my last name on the screen and add A-M in front of that, .ca, and that's the website.
Okay. And for those of our listeners who may not be able to see the names at the bottom of the screen, either because you're only listening and not watching, I will have the website listed on the post. So feel free to check that out on the blog post that will be going out for this episode. So great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so you and I share a publicist, and he sent you my way. And usually it's because people have either written books or they're into, movies or sometimes it's musicians. In your case, you're an author. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yes, it's still a bit of a surprise to me. I worked as a social worker and then as a university professor for about 40 years and retired in 2018 and never expected this writing journey would happen. And then during the first lockdown of COVID, when nobody in the world was allowed to leave the house, I started to get a bit cabin feverish. And I decided that I was going to pull out my computer. Since I couldn't go outside, I would go inward. And I thought I'd be journaling. But in fact, what happened was the first line that came out was, when she awoke, it was with such joy in her heart. And I was quite flummoxed by that. And I thought, okay, then. When I was a child, I wanted to be a writer, but I abandoned that when I headed off to university. And that was a very long time ago. So I decided that I'd pursue it. I had no clue who this person was. I had no clue why she was happy, but I knew that I had a yearning to find joy. And when I wrote that book, I crafted a world that I would like to live in, and it became a futuristic science fiction fantasy, which again surprised me. And I self-published it with Publication Services of Friesen Press in 2021. And then a few months later, two preteens sat me down and said, you have to write another one. One requested a dragon, the other requested a magical wolf. And that wasn't the world I had built in Spindrifts, my first book.
Yeah.
So it took me a little while to figure out it's a sequel, but it stands alone. And the world transformed into more fantasy with a lot of magic, and a dragon and a wolf. and that's spelldrifts.
Yeah.
And then I thought that I would like to try a more real world book, and crafted my third book, which came out in 2025, called Fugitive Riffs. And it's completely unrelated to the other two books.
Okay.
It's about 4 teens that meet up, being asked by their school to form a debate club, which none of them is really keen on, but they decide to go for it. They're very different teenagers, and 2 of them know each other from community things, and they don't get along. And the other 2 are new people, and each of them have backstories that get uncovered as we go along. They each face a life-changing challenge, and we follow how that progresses and what happens to them after their life changes. So that's Fugitive Riffs.
Okay. So you said that choosing to write, especially the first book, came as a surprise to you. So have you never done any kind of just, small articles or just writing just for your own enjoyment before that?
When I was a child and a teenager, I wrote poetry and short stories, mainly for school, the short stories.
Okay.
And then as an academic, I wrote academic articles based on my research. But that meant when I started to write creatively, that I had to shift, because academic writing is very fact-based, very rational, very staid, a little bit pompous. And I had a lot of editing to do with my first book to capture the more creative way of writing a science fiction fantasy book. I had lots of helpful feedback in making those changes.
Well, that's good. It's good that you had feedback. So I'm curious, just that I've spoken with different writers and I know my own experiences. I have found that while my family and friends are supportive, they aren't necessarily my audience. Have you found that to be the case for you?
Um, they're not my natural audience,
Mhm.
but I have friends and relatives who are very loyal and
Mhm.
have read my books,
Yeah.
and seem to like them, and they're looking forward to each new one as they come out. Um, and some of them have written very positive reviews, but others just sort of nod when I talk about my writing and quickly change the subject.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. These books aren't for everybody.
Yeah. I would imagine that's true of even some of the more famous authors out there. I would imagine, that Charles Dickens had his fair share of friends who were like, "Yeah, that's nice, Charlie," or
I would
your
think so.
Nora Roberts, who's like, "Yeah, that's nice, but we like this genre," you know.
Yeah,
So I think that is normal.
I
So,
do too.
so what are your plans now that you've got 3 books under your belt? Are you starting to think ahead about a fourth book or?
I've just started tentatively a fourth book that follows one of the minor characters in Fugitive Riffs.
Okay.
Um, she's an irascible kind of character who lived
Mhm.
unhoused for ages and has no memories of where she came from or what her life had been.
Okay.
And in Fugitive Riffs, we reach a good place with her, but I found myself starting to wonder, well, where did she come from and what was her life story?
Mm.
So I've got about 45 pages of drafting. I'm a pantster, so I'm not quite sure where we're going yet. But I'm kind of exploring her story.
Absolutely. Going back to the beginning, you were talking about your first two books and them being like happy, joyful, set in the future. I remember thinking in that moment, wow, that's so unusual. When I hear science fiction, I also in my head think dystopian most of the time. That it's always a future that maybe looks good on the surface, but there's problems underneath, or it's a full out disaster. So I thought, wow, that's very unusual to have something set in the future that appears happy.
Well, in fact, there are things going on underneath in the first book.
Mhm.
Um, I was determined to write, it's called The Place They Live is Land of Hope.
Hmm.
But it's a pretty boring book if there isn't a little bit of tension. And all
True.
of a sudden, as a pantster, I started to feel things um, stirring underneath the sort of utopian world.
Yeah.
And so we explore that in the first book. In the second book, things are all resolved from the first book
Mm.
until strangers come into the land from another place that's a mystery at first. And they want to go back to the old ways.
Mm.
The two books are kind of matriarchal societies,
Mhm.
and they want to go back to the patriarchal ways. And so there has to be conflict resolution
Sure.
between the two groups.
Absolutely. Well, and you're right. I mean, every good story, I mean, I'm going to pick on Little House on the Prairie just because I was watching the episode earlier today. But
Yeah,
I mean, something as nice and family, there's always still some kind of problem or villain, even in something like that. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's just what it takes to write a good story. You've got to have something that causes tension or some issue, even if it's an internal issue. There just has to be something. Otherwise, what's the story?
It's boring.
Yeah.
You know, I knew that the first go around with my story skimmed the surface of any even fantasy or futuristic world, and
Yeah.
that there had to be more to it. And it was quite a ride, and I was quite surprised at my creative thinking about the whole thing. And
Yeah.
then for Spelldrifts, the fantasy, I hadn't read fantasy books for a number of years because they kind of pulled me into a mystical world,
Right.
and my job was in a very real world, and I
Yeah.
couldn't kind of dream like that. So I kind of made up a very different kind of world and different kinds of magic
Mhm.
that probably break a lot of rules. But I'm happy with what happened and I get good feedback on it.
Absolutely. Well, that's the whole, I think, the whole pleasure of writing fantasy or futuristic things is that you get to create the rules of that world. You can suspend reality to some extent. You
Hmm.
know, I think of there was this old Disney, I don't know if it was just like a short feature, but I remember I'll never forget this episode about the plausible impossible. And that was the magic of Disney. They would take something that could never happen in real life, but if they made it plausible, we would, we would dismiss that it wasn't possible in real life and we would thoroughly get lost in the story. And we
Hmm.
get to do that as writers. We can say, well, this is the world I'm building. And, yes, that could not happen in the real world, but in this world, we change the rules a little bit here, a little bit there, and suddenly, boom, this is possible. And I love
That's
that.
right. Yeah. I painted myself into a corner a couple of times and had to go for long walks to figure out what's the solution.
Hmm.
How does it twist so we can keep going? And some of that took a lot of thinking and a little bit of spontaneity as I worked with my fingertips on the laptop.
Yeah, and I get that. You know, that's the thing. We can start writing a story even before we start typing, even before it ever gets to a point where the story is fashioned. You know, we start thinking about the possibilities, how we would, you know, how the story would flow. We take a few days or weeks and we let life kind of happen, and we get draw inspiration from things around us. And, you know, because we're relaxed and we're not thinking too hard, inspiration comes from different places, and ooh, this would be a great element in my story. And I love that we can do that. I keep like a little note in my phone, like a little notebook, when things occur to me, like, oh, that would be a great element to add, or, you know, oh, I love that
Mhm.
name, let me, you know, jot this down. I'm sorry, my phones are driving me crazy, so if you see me fiddling, it's just like they keep trying to fall off of me. So but I love that we could, you know, we've got that source of inspiration, and we might take a day or a couple hours where we jot down our story and our outline, our ideas. We might even start writing a few paragraphs, but we can put it on pause and give ourselves time to think and absorb the world around us to create more of that story. At least that's been my experience. I don't know about you.
It's been my experience as well, but there's been another dimension that completely surprised me, which is even when for a pantser, even if I have a thought in mind that I wanted to try, it's like the characters take over and they go, that's not what's going to happen. We're going to leap into this now. And I've talked to other authors, even people who are like plan every paragraph practically. And they say, oh, yeah, I plan it, but sometimes something shifts. And it's quite expected. In my first book, a character was supposed to be visiting Land of Hope to take knowledge back to where she lived.
Mm.
And I was thinking, okay, she has to say something at this one scene. What does she say? And what she said was, I love it here. I wish I could stay. And I thought, well, that's a little pushy because I hadn't anticipated that. But in fact, she stayed and she was in the second book as in like
Nice.
one of the primary characters.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I wasn't expecting that. And there are other examples of that as well.
Yep. Well, it makes sense. I don't know if you kind of design your characters, like if you know who your elements are in each story before you start writing, or if you develop them as you go along. But if you have someone with a specific personality and you're writing to that personality, I can see where their personality might seep through, and they would say something like what you just said,
Mhm.
and it would catch you off guard because you're not writing to your overall idea, you're writing to that personality.
When I write, the characters emerge.
Mhm.
And as I start to see their character, then when I'm writing, I kind of get immersed in who they are. And the writing, as best as I can, reflects it. So if I have somebody who's very serious, um, they talk a little bit more rationally, more like an academic, maybe. And then somebody like the character Alice in my third book,
Mm.
who's perhaps going to be in a fourth book, she was just completely chaotic and outlandish and um, irascible.
Mm.
And I had to enter that, and funny things started to come out onto the keyboard. Um, so I know a lot of authors actually spend a lot of time building their characters. My characters kind of emerged through the writing process.
Yeah. I don't know if you've encountered this experience yet. I just encountered this. I have a science fiction book that I wrote about a year ago, a little over a year ago now. And then I wrote a prequel because I wanted to explain more about a couple of the characters in the story. But it was always my plan for that first book to be a two-part book. So
Mhm.
part two has yet to be written. I had outlined it. I had this idea in my head of exactly where I was going to go, including a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end of the first book that I was going to then twist a little
Mhm.
bit. But in doing interviews and speaking with other more experienced writers, um, and them not making direct suggestions, but just comments they made, one of the conversations I had very recently has changed my mind about how I'm going to do that second book. So my initial twist is not going to be what I actually end up doing. It's going to be, I think, even better because of that conversation with someone more experienced.
Mhm.
So,
When I wrote my first book, I thought I had wound up the whole story in a tidy bow because I thought one book and I'm done. And then when the preteens sat me down,
mm,
I thought, oh, I guess there's more. And an author who is also a Friesen Press author reached out to me having read my first one and said, no, you have to write more. And he said, it's a world that I would love to live in, and you have to keep writing. I've done two in that world, although it shifts. And he still will say, try a prequel like you did,
mm,
or short stories. He says, I just want to keep reading about those characters. So I have that at the back of my mind,
mm.
but I'm trying to see if Alice has a story that would be worth bringing out to the world. And then I'll go back and think about prequels and short stories.
Yeah. Well, she sounds like an interesting character, so I hope that you'll be able to find a way to tell her story, her backstory, and maybe some other adventures for her.
Yeah.
Um, so tell us about you. I mean, so you're an academic, you're a writer, but who are you outside of that?
I'm a partner to Dave, uh, who came to me a bit later in life with
Mhm.
a whole family that have brought me into their family. Um, I'm a sister to three sisters and an aunt to a niece and nephew and their partners, and now a great aunt. Um, I'm a basketball fan, which is a good thing because we go to lots of teenage basketball games.
Mhm.
Um, and we have a cabin on an island about 30 minutes drive from where we live in town. I come from a community with an interesting history, Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, which is a nickel mining community.
Okay.
Um, and for 100 years, of course, there were no controls on the extent of the pollution. When I
Mhm.
was a young child, there were days we couldn't go out because the acid rain or the sulfuric dioxide was so strong it would like burn your nose and your throat. Um, and so, with that kind of burning, we were known as kind of a moonscape. Our rocks were all burned, the trees were all gone, our lakes were dead, air pollution. And a group of community people, including people from the university, about 50 years ago, decided we're going to rehabilitate this community's environment. And 55 years later, we have bush, we have trees, we have vibrant lakes. Jane Goodall put this as one of her reasons for hope in a documentary she did a few years ago. And to various parts of the world, we're known for our regreening project. So I have been steeped in that for pretty much of my life to see the evolution. And I know that there's still work to do in this community, but it's an inspiring tale for other communities, whether it's the kind of history we have or other histories, or a community that has other problems in it. They may be social, political, economic. To think about how can people pull together to build a stronger community. And we still have issues here, but we also have a mechanism to pull people together from very different parts of the community to problem solve and find ways forward, knowing that things take time.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really integrally part of that whole regreening process, but I was certainly an active observer and champion of it.
Well, it's nice to hear. Yeah, I have to say, and I guess it's because I never cared to know. That's all I can think of. But I've never imagined that degree of pollution in Canada. When I think of Canada, I think of pristine lakes and beautiful mountains and just, the cities are cities, but outside of that, I just think pristine, green, clean when I think of Canada.
30 miles from here,
Mhm.
even when I was a kid, it was like that. But in the community here, the city, which is about 175,000 people now,
Mhm.
it was like a really horrific landscape.
Mm.
Because before we built a super stack and before there were regulations about cleaning up the amount of pollution we were spewing, we were probably one of the worst polluters in North America, if not beyond. And now we're known for having turned all that around.
And see, and that's amazing that collectively you saw a problem and then you actually fixed it. And commercialism, money didn't get in the way of making that change. That's very impressive to me.
The companies and the unions got on board and worked together on this at a time when the companies were doing mass layoffs because ways of mining became more mechanized and nickel prices dropped. And still, they wanted to problem solve for the long term. And it was quite impressive that they and activists and business people and academics all sat at the same table and said, okay, let's look long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I think the part that's so impressive is that they did look long term. I look around me and frankly, I don't watch or look at the news any more than I have to because I find it depressing. But what little I do see, people see these problems here. There's talk of change, but it always comes to a dead end. And ultimately, it's about the money or it's about the short term view instead of the long term view, despite the stated goals. So, seeing Canada as a place where they actually took action instead of just talk, again, it's impressive.
And it is unusual.
Mm.
Um, and there will be still people who haven't visited here in 30, 40 years would say, why would anybody live there? But we have a beautiful environment now. Um, I can walk 10 minutes from here and there's the lake and people are fishing, people are canoeing and kayaking. And around the corner, I can walk through bush for hours and hours and hours right in the urban landscape. Um, and it's pretty remarkable, the change.
That really is. That's amazing. So we're getting close to the time where we I don't want to lose out on time and forget to ask you the question from the previous guest. So they asked the question, if you could change something from your childhood, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Um, that's a hard question because I feel like I had a very good childhood. Um, and I think if I could change anything, I would have wished to have had more social skills as a child. I was a little bit, well, I was very socially awkward
Mhm.
and also not the least bit athletic. So if I could change something, I would have liked to have been more athletic as a child and even as an adult.
I know how you feel about that. I have to agree with that same wish for myself. I wish I had been athletic as a child, and oh, I'll never be athletic as an adult, but I'd like to be.
Yeah, yeah, it would be nice. I'm surrounded in my family with athletic people, and I'm a great cheerleader for them.
I get that. My close friends have always been very athletic, but I think, and this is again, maybe it's about how you're raised. I don't know, but I remember enjoying being active, doing things, love playing like your volleyball, your games outside. I didn't even necessarily mind running, although I didn't love it. But I feel like in my case, um, the public education system, the requirements for a gym class versus just, hey, let's go play games
Mhm.
outside and exercise without exercise kind of killed that in me, because it became something required rather than something enjoyable.
Well,
Maybe that's
and
just my feeling.
somewhat unrealistic. When I was in grade 11,
Mhm,
I probably weighed 95 pounds.
mhm,
No athlete like I see around now where everybody's on the fitness routine.
mhm.
And I had to lift a 20-pound barbell 15 times if I was going to pass that phys ed module.
Yeah.
In my class was a classmate who was 6 feet tall, a natural athlete who did work out with weights.
Mhm,
And she just looked at me and she said, don't let this change your world. That's just not a realistic expectation for you. They should have started you on 1 pound weights.
mhm.
And if it wasn't for her, I would have felt like a real loser.
Yeah.
But she said, no, they're trying to get us all to be the same, but we're not starting from the same place.
That's the key right there, and that's what made took me from loving, outdoor games and doing things like that to, "Oh, this is exercise," and it's like they programmed us to hate that then because they made it a class, and there were grades, and if you did not meet this certain measurement, you were a failure.
Yeah.
So instead of learning to love the activity, you learn to hate it.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
came close to failing phys ed that year.
Mhm.
And my parents went to talk to the teacher, and she said, Well, I never hear people call her name. So a group of my friends started to call my name, during the warm up before class started, and my mark went up 20%. I didn't change anything else. She just never noticed what I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I say that never should have been a class. If it was, it should have been informal. Hey, let's show you how this game works. Let's show you how to play badminton. Let's show you how to play volleyball. It should have been something just for enjoyment and to break up the school day, just to give you the exercise without it being a class.
And
That's totally my opinion.
And skills for life.
Yes.
You should keep active. So let's go for a brisk walk, because you'll be able to do that all your life.
Yes.
Let's try yoga. That's something some of you might like to do. Let's try swimming. Some of you don't swim. We'll start with beginners for you. And the expert swimmers in the class will teach you.
Right.
Like, we all are not starting at the same place.
No. It's kind of like just like when you're not used to eating certain foods and you're trying it for the first time. Here, taste this. So taste this type of exercise.
Yeah.
See if it agrees with you. See if it grows on you. But if ultimately it doesn't work for you and you're not pleased with it, well, no one's going to force you to continue that activity. We'll find you something that's more in line with you. Yeah, as long as you do some activity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I could have
a whole conversation about that.
Yeah, I had to figure out that walking's my thing and some weights.
Yeah.
But I was an adult before I came to that. And I didn't start with 20-pound weights.
Exactly. Yeah. How much different when I look at the issues with, overweight, anyone, whether it's a kid or adult, if I could go back in time to say to these people who created the educations in our system that, hey, rather than ending recess and replacing it with a gym class, what if that was somehow combined where, hey, anyone interested in this game or this activity, come learn. Those of you who don't, just go, go for a run or go for a walk, but this is your activity hour rather than your gym class. If I could go back in time, I mean, think of how that could impact your whole life then, because you'd have the habit of being active, and that would be down to the day that you're even in a workspace, that this is your time for active living. How different it would be.
My observation, which is limited, is that young people are more active now. Some of them run, some of them play hockey, some of them play basketball. But there's certainly a broader base of kids that are more active than when I was growing up.
I'm glad to hear that. I haven't observed that myself, but maybe I just haven't had the advantage of seeing enough kids or having that in my life, because I don't have any children except for a stepson, and my niece and nephew lived several states away. But I hope that that's the case overall, that people are more active in teaching and helping their kids to find something that they love.
Yeah, I hope so too, because it's only going to make all of them stay healthy longer.
Yeah, it'll enhance their life, and it's good for the brain because you're busy walking or running, and again, the ideas flow, and whether it's inspiration for something you're doing in the way of work, or if it's a personal project, it can only benefit you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So at this point, I'd like to ask you to provide a question for our next guest.
And it's interesting because it isn't the same as the question you asked me, but it started out and I thought, oh, what if it's the same question? So the question I would like you to ask is, I want the person to think about their community and what's one thing they would like to do to make it stronger as a community and more together as a community.
It's stronger, more cohesive. What change? Okay, I thank you for that question. So before we wrap up the show 100%, do you have any additional thoughts or comments you'd like to share with our audience?
Um, I, I'd, I'd like to thank people who read books. I really would like to encourage people who haven't read books to try it out, just the way we were talking about trying out something for phys ed or for food. Pick up a book, even a graphic novel, and just check it out. I think reading can be a very good way to think about our world. And I think that reading can be a good companion as you're going through times when you might be on your own or you might be having trouble. It's like a good escape. I'd just like to encourage people to think about reading and the kinds of things they would like to read.
I think that's a brilliant way to end our show. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing that wisdom. And once again, I'd like people to remember your website, and I'm hoping I get this right. So it's A-M Mawhiney.
Yes.
And it's spelled Mawhiney. And it's .ca because you're in Canada.
Correct.
All right.
That's exactly right.
Very good. And again, it'll be at a link on my website, zoemichaels.com, under the blog section. And I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes when I post it on the Riverside, as well as the other podcast channels out there. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed our chat.